What do you think about emerging technologies with artificial intelligence? It's a topic that some people find distressing, others are cautious or curious, and some, like my guest Rick McCawley, see enormous potential for creativity and productivity. Rick believes that AI can help us do away with boring grunt work while amplifying our creativity, productivity, and our ability to express ourselves. Since the release of a number of AI based tools to the public in 2022, Rick has racked up thousands of hours applying AI to his expertise as photographer, designer, professor, and author. In this episode, Rick and I discuss how he's integrating AI into his work, the distinction between AI as a tool, and what it really takes to make work that connects with and moves people. His thoughts on how we can benefit from AI, and lessons he is passing on to his students and sharing with the broader community. I believe that showing is greater than telling, and Rick's growing body of work with AI truly does show us the door to broader horizons. Let's dive in. Rick, welcome to Making Business Art. How are you doing
Hi,
today?
Ezekiel. I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for inviting me today.
Well, thank you so much for carving out time to come on as a guest today. Rick, we met each other a number of years ago, and I know that you have been very dedicated in your career to visual communication, image making, to teaching young people.
Yeah.
And as somebody who teaches undergraduate students, and now you've been doing that for a while, before we get into the meat of our conversation, wondering if we can just take a look back when you were an undergraduate. Was there a technology you really enjoyed in your late teens or early 20s back then, be it professionally or personally?
Wow, we're going way back. So we're talking about film cameras, basically, for me. It was definitely the thing. So I was in Gainesville. I was an Army brat. So my dad was in Korea. He bagged bodies in Korea, and then he ended up being a nuclear technician. So when I was born, we moved to Japan, Okinawa, and he was put in charge of the missile defense systems for Okinawan defense military wise. Then we moved to Greece, lived there for 4 more years. And by age 10, came back to the States, traveled around, ended up in Gainesville. And in Gainesville it was a great place. The university was right there. So from age 12 on, I lived there.
So you said film
Right.
camera. What kind of joy were you getting out of the film camera
Oh my
at that
God. It
time?
was, my dad, God bless him, because he enabled me to have choices in life, to do anything and everything. So he helped me build a darkroom in my house when I was 14 years
cool.
old. He let me get scuba diving certified. So I've made over 3,000 dives now. And at age 14, I was scuba diving. So he encouraged all these things. He gave me all this potential. The one thing that I want to do in giving forward to anybody who's blessed like I am, and to be able to have a parents that were able to do all that. And they weren't rich by any means, but they were rich in their wonder and their excitement about what you could do with things. So he saw I took a really serious interest, and I saved up all my money from working at McDonald's and every job I had. I was a busboy at a Chinese restaurant. I mean, I did everything to make money. So he would match whatever I spent in camera equipment, in a dark room. He converted a trailer into a dark room, and so I had it parked in the backyard. And I and my girlfriend used to sneak back there all the time, but that's another story. So, my fascination. And then from high school, I was on the yearbook and newspaper, et cetera. And then when I got to the University of Florida, and he just kind of forced me to, I was a horrible student. I almost failed out of UF, right? I was a D student. But Jerry Uelsman was one of the teachers there. And I had started manipulating, taking 3 different negatives and putting them together into a composite print, the precursor of Photoshop. And I got to take classes in basic art history from him in thinking about that. He was revolutionary. He was doing this in the 60s, He was putting 10 enlargers and taking a print from piece of paper from one enlarger to the next, masking off areas. And what we now do in Photoshop and think about is like not even a big deal. So in my lifetime, I went from 3 channels on TV, payphones, corded phones that you had a party line. I mean, just, color TV was just introduced. I didn't see color TV till I was 10 years old, because living overseas, there was no TV in our house anyway. So it was all about wonder and all these kind of things. Anyway, fast forward. So I go from the technology of manipulating photographs and that kind of thing to being a photojournalist. And at UF, I worked for the Alligator. That's why my grades were so bad. So the Independent Florida Alligator was an off-campus newspaper with a
Mhm.
bunch of basically liberal druggies just exploring the world and doing crazy stuff. We photographed the first space shuttle launch for United Press International. So I started doing stringer work for them. We covered the Carter, Reagan, campaigns. I photographed the Daytona 500, basically all the UF games, football, basketball, etc. So I got all this great experience.
So
And
that was your classroom, really was
yeah,
the Florida
yeah,
Alligator.
it was 70
Yeah.
hours a week for like $5 an hour, and it was just everything. So I had a portfolio that literally was world class. So when
Nice.
I applied for National Geographic and the Miami Herald, there were 6,500 applicants to the Miami Herald, to give you an idea. And so
Mhm.
I was one of 3 interns over the summer, went to work there, and then I had the front page like every other week. And
Yeah.
because of that hard work and my experience that I already had, I had my 10,000 hours before I even went to work for them.
Well,
So it
you
was a
know what?
natural, they hired me
Yeah.
right out of that.
I mean, that's still like lots of valuable advice and lessons there for young people today, I would say, because portfolio
That's
is really
that's
everything.
exactly everything. And then the real big thing is adapting, learning what your craft is. Put your 10,000 hours in whatever you decide to do. Follow your passion, and it will always succeed in bringing you money, wealth, and happiness, right? Which is really what it's about. My dad, when I said I want to be a photojournalist, he says, "Can you make money at that?" And then the next year at the Herald, I
Mm.
made almost as much money as he did. And he was kind of like, I guess you got this. And
That's great.
obviously I had to invest that. I had to invest my personal time, my energy, my life's blood to go
Mhm.
be the best at this. And
Yeah.
the place I learned that from was my band director. I was in a band, the Buholtz Marching Band was one of the best in the country at the time.
Is
And
that
I
in
was I
undergrad or in high school?
in high school, I'm sorry, yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
all 3 years of high school I played in the band as well as shooting pictures. And he had us marching every single day. We played in jazz band, symphonic band, and marching band every day, 4 to 5 hours every single day. We'd come in on Saturdays, 5 and 6 hours in the hot, brutal sun. So we were and uniforms on, right? And then we go to competitions. We went to Mexico and performed. And there was 23 trumpet players. Okay, so again, hard work, diligence, do what you love and love what you do. And then I got to be first trumpet player.
Mm.
And then I decided no matter what I decide to do, I'm going to do it with everything I got. And I'm going to make sure I'm the best at whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure that that I realize that hard work, diligence, but also loving what you do is the best way to succeed at anything in life, really.
For sure. Well, Rick, we'll make some additional stops in your exploration of your career journey.
Yeah.
But let's get into the formal conversation now. And the question that I like to start with is, where do you work and what do you get paid to do?
I get paid to do what I want to do with my life now. And I think I always have. I've been one
Mhm.
of those people that never had a job because I've always done whatever I loved all my life. It's a rare thing. And every day I've been teaching for 23 years now at Broward College, and every day and I could retire. I have my bank, I'm ready to go. I can just travel the world, but I haven't because I've got so much to give back. I've got the basic tenet of just getting people curious. You know, every single student, when I see them come back 10 years after they were my student and they've got this great job, working in New York or California or Bolivia or wherever they are, and to see that they've got a family, they're tax-paying citizens, and they're just having a life, and to have some part of that, that's the
Mhm.
whole reason why I live today. That's
Yeah.
it.
Well, I mean,
That
it
sums it up.
also sounds from your what you were just sharing a few moments ago that you had the very good fortune and blessing of having really good teachers that really helped
Yes,
to shape and mold you. So I think paying that forward to young
absolutely.
people, it's really wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, even as a photojournalist, I was about learning how life worked. I was so shy in high school that I would have my
Mhm.
sisters go up and order at Burger King. Okay. Like I couldn't talk to a person.
Hmm.
And then another teacher came it was a speech class, and I had to get up and give a speech. And she said, well, to do a speech, to get over your fear, pick something you love. So I came in 100-degree heat that day at the University of Florida in full scuba gear, including wetsuit and a tank on my back. And I
Yeah.
walked into class and I gave my speech, never looked back. Of course, then working for the Herald, literally every day I would have to go into people's homes, sometimes after tragedies in their life, and then photograph
Mm.
them. And I had to talk to them, put them at ease, and I had to figure out a way. I learned what life is about, what people are about. I learned intimately. I lived with the Hare Krishnas when I was in college. I went with a motorcycle gang across country. I went out and saw a cross burning by the Klan. I've been to a nudist colony. So I've been to all these extremes of life and documented it. I spent 24 hours in the Miami hospital's emergency room, photographing gunshot wounds and that kind of stuff. So I've lived every bit of life. It's like I've been a chameleon, being able to bear witness to what life really is all about.
Yeah.
So if I can pay some of that knowledge a little bit forward, but I also don't want to be the preacher. I don't want to be the sage on the stage that says, if you do like what I did, then no, I got to figure out a way. What's your voice? What is it you have to say? How do
Hmm.
you find your own curiosity? What do you find? How do you find your passion? And that's the harder thing. The hardest thing to do as a teacher is to take yourself out of the equation and put into it, okay, how can I empathetically create an experience for you that turns those switches? I call it a mind bomb. So I plant these little grenades in their head that later on, and it might be a year, 2 years later, all of a sudden it goes off and it says, ooh, epiphany. I got this figured out. That's my job
Yeah.
now. And I think it always kind of has been. I've always been a very empathetic person, because if you're going to photograph someone that just had a son die because they brought a Claymore mine home to their home and it blew up and killing the friends and blew up the whole neighborhood, and you've got to photograph this couple and then you've got to start to interview them. Wow. You learn empathy the deep, dark way, and you learn it to see. So when that photograph appeared, the parents came to me and said, thank God you did this story. I was all concerned that, oh, how can I intrude on this family that just lost their son, right? What
Mm.
a horrible thing to do. And they said, no, you're getting the word out there so this doesn't happen to somebody else's son. You're bearing the witness so this doesn't happen again. So I started to realize that, journalists are the smartest people I've ever met in my life, because they every single day have to go out there and empathetically tell the stories of others. And they get to dive into everybody's lives, and see what the perspective's like. So that was the best training ground for life. I think the best training for life in general.
Yeah.
And
So Rick, so we met some years ago, and we were just speaking about this right before we started recording at this service design event that I was co-hosting. And since then, I've been following you on Facebook and seeing your passion that you share on Facebook of images. You like really amazing photographs, by the way,
thank you.
of diving, like underwater diving, coral reefs, sharks, fish, etc., etc. And then a few months ago, uh, I noticed a change, and the change was that you started just going bonkers on Facebook, sharing images that you were experimenting with and making through artificial intelligence. So there's this evolution
Yes.
of Rick, the image maker, photographer, graphic designer, visual communicator, and now
Yeah.
there's this evolution, this sort of newfound passion that you found through this technology. So I just want to acknowledge that. So you train undergrads in creative skills and tools that are changing really rapidly due to
Yep.
leaps in technology, like what you're exploring right now. So I'd like for you to tell me about what changes are you seeing and how are you adapting them in and out of the classroom?
Okay. So let me preface this a little bit. I teach graphic design. In fact, I designed the AS degree graphic design program, and I've designed every single course within it. When I left the Herald, why I left the Herald, part of it was that I started doing consulting. So it was in the 1990s, right? Desktop publishing just started up. Got a Macintosh Plus and a floppy disk, and I started playing with this thing. It was crazy. It had black and white pixels. It wasn't even color. It wasn't even shades of gray. And I had a dot matrix printer. But what I learned is how to do desktop publishing by myself. I spent $4,000. Now, I'm a 20-year-old kid, right? Living at home, going eat, working at McDonald's and working for, et cetera. And I spent $4,000 on this thing. That's basically a box that was pretty useless. But I took that into the Miami Herald back in the 90s, mid 90s. And I laid out in PageMaker 2.0 the entire front page of the Miami Herald. And I was sitting next to a Linotronic, which output pieces of film that made into a plate, goes onto the printing press in this big giant monster of a building on the bay, right? That was and no longer exists at all. It's a virtual place that they work in. And there were 65 photojournalists there. Anyway, the long story short is 600 people lost their jobs within a couple of months because desktop publishing replaced all of them. Now, luckily, these were retired people and a lot of students that literally took pieces of paper with typeset on it and then waxed the back of it, put it on a mock-up board and pasted, photographed that whole thing, and then stripped in a photograph inside of that, then make the plate. And I just shortened that by about an hour and 600 less people to 6 computers, and the Miami Herald has been digital ever since. So I took that knowledge and I started making big bucks. I'd get paid $1,500 a day to train 6 people from corporate America how to do this desktop publishing thing. So then I started consulting with Barry University, the International Fine Arts College, and the Art Institute, all 3 creating their curriculums, and figure out, well, how do you navigate into this new space? So my whole life has been about these dramatic technology changes where I learned it on my own, I adapted myself, and I innovated. In fact, this is a button that I created for my students. Learn, adapt, and innovate.
That says learn, adapt, and innovate for people listening.
Right. And it's AI that is adapt and innovate, right? So I learned what it was. I adapted myself and for the future of something that nobody knew what it was going to become. So fast forward to today, this is bigger than the internet. Artificial intelligence literally is as big as the invention of language. Okay. Now you're probably thinking for a minute there, what the hell? This guy's is, drank the Kool-Aid way too fast, right? So I see myself doing it at age 63 all over again, but this is what I'm good at. This is what I excel at. I pick up stuff that people think is just, ridiculous. And I say, how can we learn how to adapt ourselves? So there's a bunch of problems here. There's a problematic nature of change. How many jobs got rid of when desktop publishing happened? When the internet happened? What happened to newspapers can be paralleled exactly today with what you're going to see in the next 2 or 3 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to lose estimated about 90 million jobs across the world. We're going to create wealth of over $7 trillion potentially because of the augmentation, the step up that human beings get to augment their lives with these tools called artificial intelligence. And there's many different types of it for image generation. In fact, here's the book that I did. It's about Midjourney. It's a 250-page book full of images of what I did in 6 months with Midjourney, the software. I type text and it creates images. So the book basically has the text that I typed. And while that may seem like a really easy thing to do, it's actually quite interesting. And instead of looking for what can I get it to do to show off, oh, this is cute, this is fun, whatever, I'm designing using ChatGPT and Midjourney, a children's book called Imagine. And it's about my daughter's imagination. So the idea of the book is that every kid has a scary imagination, right? There's a monster in the closet. Well, in my book, the imagination is the cause of the problem, and it's also the solution. So she's scared of going to sleep because there's a monster in her closet. She goes to sleep, and she has this dream where she goes to this porthole, and she takes her black cat with her who can speak to animals. And she finds this monster sitting in the corner, and he's really sad. And the cat says he's sad because it's his birthday, and no one wants to celebrate it with him. They're all scared of him. And so she says, let's throw a birthday party for the monster. So I created an image of this monster in a birthday party, this little girl being empowered by her imagination to think it's not a monster. Now think just for a minute. AI has been considered a monster, and it's just waiting for you to have a birthday party with. It is all the knowledge collectively of humankind, right? That's been sorted and aggregated. But you have to ask it a question. It has no creativity, no real intelligence. It's artificial intelligence. It's got all the knowledge, but doesn't know what to do with any of it. So if I tell it, like I did, give me 5 fears that children have that are caused by imaginary problems, like a thunderstorm, a loud noise, right? So when she goes through the porthole, she's now becomes the conductor of the symphony of the thunder. She gets to decide when the rain goes in, and she gets to call upon the trumpets, and she gets to, say when the thunderclap happens, and she gets to see all this appear in front of her, and she has control in her imagination, right? So if we imagine the AI that has all this incredible power is merely a shoulders we can step onto to see the promised land of what our creativity and what our humanity is all about, oh my God, we've got it figured out. And that's what I figured out. I've spent over 1,200 hours literally inside of Midjourney on my phone, typically, prompting day and night till 4 o'clock in the morning, putting in text and seeing what happens. And then directing it to do graphic design work, to do this book. I'm doing a coloring book for adults. Just like thinking, well, what can my creativity and what can my 50 years of image making do for me? Now, I've made images in creative ways. I've made them for photojournalism, and I care about truth and veracity. I've created artworks. I've published over 38 different books now, mostly about my artwork, also 10 textbooks that I've used in the classroom, designed by my students, for my students. So we eliminated $100 worth of textbook for each and every class, replaced it with a PDF made by fellow students, so they knew exactly what they needed to know. Custom-made book for each class. And now I'm going to go back and redo them all as interactive ones that will include video and that will include lesson plans and things to do so that they can do it on their own time and they can excel. So those students that are really good at something, they can continue to go on. And I'm going to continue to do these books on Midjourney, and now with Adobe, I'm working with the Firefly team and evangelizing their products and the generative image making. And then also I'm teaching all the educators at Broward College, which are kind of slow to get a start, right? So, if you grew up like most people my age, think about this new technology. I don't have time for that. It's going to be cheating on papers. That's what they're going to talk about all the time. I was on a AIGA conference call, and they said, I said, how many of you are using generative image making, text to image? And about 80% were not. And I said, why not? He says, well, it's been banned at our school, or I banned it in my classroom. And I said, why did you ban it? I think it's wrong. I think it's stealing from artists, blah, 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 blah. They gave me the whole reasons. I'm actually going to do a podcast just about that whole thing. Okay. And there's a lot of misinformation, but long story short is I asked them, have you tried it? 80% of those 80% said no. And I said, until you try it, you really can't judge what this is about until you actually spend a lot of time in there. And I'm here basically to tell anybody. And when I show off all those pictures that you see on Facebook, what I'm really doing is I'm shouting really loud and I'm saying, look, until you see what the potential is, quit saying that it did that and taking ownership. When I look at AI, I look for my own humanity, and it echoes back from the history of art. And I find my own humanity in there. In fact, I found myself so much more elevated in my intellectual thinking process, so much more in tune of what it is to make artwork and tell stories, which I've always done. What are the human things? What separates us from a machine? What do we do?
Well, I have to come clean here and like also share that I have my own anxieties with AI, because it is very evident that it's going to relieve people of responsibilities in good and bad ways.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's something that we need to figure out how to navigate and design around and for. And I think in what I hear you sharing, it covers, I mean, you're pointing at opportunities for young people, and you're also acknowledging some of the issues that established professionals are going to grapple with. I think something is interesting that I'm hearing in what you're sharing that's coming up for me is a couple of things. One is from the day that proto-human beings picked up two rocks and started to bang them together to make a cutting tool, we've also always been using technology. So even in the 80s or 70s or 60s, where cut and paste was literally, you cut something with a pair of scissors and you pasted it on, like you were just talking about
Yep.
how things were made at the Miami Herald, to the other argument that of the stealing from artists. And not to detract from that, because I think there's something there to definitely explore and be worked out. But I'm just listening to a book by Malcolm Gladwell and company around about
one of my favorite authors. Yeah.
Gosh, I'm blanking. Let me just here and open this up. Miracle on Wonder, which is a book about Paul Simon, the singer, the musician, and there's great stories in it. And you hear the stories of certain songs, and he said like, oh well, this was like, this one song came like a little bit from Bach and a little bit from this other, gospel minister, and a little bit from, ABC, other artists or other influences. And then he pulled that together and he's making something new. So that's to acknowledge that artists do that, except that the way that it's being done through AI, I can
Absolutely.
If I had a body of work and I wanted to get paid, I can understand. Very complicated issue. We don't have time to get into it now.
No.
But I'm just acknowledging that, it's a lot of changes. And part of the reason why I wanted to speak with you is because I can see that you have navigated or lived through a number of changes and have, perspectives to share.
Absolutely.
So I just want to jump back in the time machine and go back and look at some moments in your journey. And so again, just reaffirming or like reconnecting with this idea that your entire professional journey has revolved around image making and visual communication, photography through software and some other means, all while navigating all these significant changes in technologies that enabled your work. So looking back at your career up to pre-pandemic times, pre-AI, what were the most significant technological changes you had to adapt to, like, and grapple with? Was there something in particular that's memorable to you in your journey?
Yeah. I've always been a proponent of the technology. I mean, two things. One, it's inevitable. You're not going to stop AI at this point.
Right.
And I don't even want to even think about that part of it, because I do want to protect the rights. I think the SAG-AFTRA thing going on with the, is definitely got legitimate things. If you're an actor and they can take your image and then recast you in a different play. But there's also the flip side. What about I forget her name now, Star Wars, and she had passed away and they needed to finish the movie.
Carrie Fisher.
Or Harrison Ford. As long as people are number one in the thought process of how we use the technology, and that we have to make sure that they're left whole. One of the most affirming things in general is from, I forget who it was that said this, but a good company will think about the knowledge base that they have. And as they make more money because you become more efficient at your job, you get elevated to a new level of thinking. We are in a intellectual economy, a intellectual property economy, I should say. So we've gone from industrial age, we've gone into the service industry, and now we're going to the intellectual economy. So professors work entirely off of what's in my brain, right? My experiences, et cetera. Lawyers, doctors, these are all intellectual property economists, right? Actors, actresses, same thing, right? So a lot of us are being pulled up into that level. So that artist that does the handcraft work, yes, the painters are still going to be there. The sculptors are still going to be there. A tattoo artist student of mine is still going to be doing her craft. But now that tattoo artist can then use the AI to generate new tattoos that might be more appropriate for her customers, and can start thinking about an empathetic way. How can I take my artwork, feed it into the machine, and get other iterations of it? I look at it as an iteration machine, as a stepping stool to get me to a higher level of thinking. So in an average week working for the Miami Herald, I would print probably 30 to 100 photographs. Average week on Midjourney, 1,000 images. Of that, I would say probably 10 are saleable. I put them on a t-shirt, make them coffee mug out of it, you know. So I am exponentially more powerful than I was yesterday. Generating 78,000 images in 1 year? That's insane, no matter what you compare it to. And I actually created underwater pictures that matched and rival my own photography. So yeah, it's this double-edged sword that all technology does. It's interesting that the word Luddite comes from this contrarian viewpoint that when the loom and making cloth got automated, all the people who had that skill that they had to apprentice for years to be able to do went away. So this supposed mythical person called Luddite basically started a revolution where they smashed the machines. It's interesting that that same weaving machine was the first computer. Mm-hmm. Go back and take a look at how computational things go, right? And so industrial age comes and goes, and we figure out, and this is why my big thing is learn first. And the learning part right now that we all have to navigate is we've got to come to terms. I'm an actor. This is what I do. How does it affect me? So here's what I'd suggest. Download Bing or any of those things and ask it, I do this for a living. How is my life going to be changed by AI? How can I use AI to improve my life? And then ask it, what kind of sandwiches should I eat because I'm a type 2 diabetic? Just ask it every question that you have. So if you've ever used Alexa, if you've ever used Google Maps, if you've ever used Apple Maps or whatever, just pretend this is on steroids. It's the same thing you're talking to, and you can actually talk to it now, and you can get answers back. I'm having it write poetry for myself. So I take my poetry, I feed it to it, says, make this better, and use the sort of style of Martin Luther King when you talk about this. And let me have you talk about elevating the idea of AI. And it just spits out just gorgeous stuff. Now, has it stolen Martin Luther King's voice? No, it took my words and it adapted it to be more like Martin Luther King. And typically what I do, if you want to think about this, generative AI should be about, I'm going to take Martin Luther King and I'm going to put JFK. I just actually did this morning. It made this beautiful poem, right? And I'm going to mix those together. And I'm going to throw in a little Gorman in there, the woman that gave the Obama speech. And then I'm going to say, add these phrases from me. And then I'm going to say, do it in the style of. So I'm able to take history of all knowledge in the human beings, put in my take on this, and then apply it to whatever I want to do in life. So it just expands me as a human being.
Yeah. So let me just reach back to some things you were sharing earlier, because you just said, so now you're much more powerful, right? This technology is making you much more powerful. And a perspective I've had on technology, especially digital technology, for some time now, is that it's really neutral and it's an amplifier of what's inside us. So if you have a jerk, you're going to have a mega jerk.
Yeah, and if I'm worried about the next presidential election, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you have somebody with goodness in their heart, then you're going to have that amplified. So I'm hearing you talking about the learning part of all of this, of learning the tool.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What about the more internal, ethical or spiritual, whatever you want to values, whatever you want to label it? What's your perspective as part of learning and wielding this tool?
Yeah, so I, as an educator and sort of a research of the mind kind of way of thinking about these things, I've gone down some dark places. I actually took Jerry Uelsman's name and I invoked it and make an image in the style of Jerry Uelsman. It didn't get anywhere near close. It had the style. And style's not copyrightable. So I could have generated all these images from him. And then I actually took some pictures that I found on the internet, fed it into the AI and asked it to make a text that would produce this type of image. And then I started adding my own twist to it and I started generating these things and I started thinking, oh my God, I need to burn this. This is wrong. I'm not Jerry Uelsman. In fact, one of the problems that he talked about in class was, don't go out and be me, be you, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's it. I think every technology is an echo of us internally. I think we're all at an existential crisis moment that we all must learn what is good, what is ethical and not ethical about it. I could have set up photographs when I worked for the Miami Herald, and there's many people who have done that. I could have used Photoshop for bad in photojournalism, and the truth would be gone, as it
Mhm.
almost is at this point in the world, right? Even words and language and verifiable truths are not even truths anymore, So we're at a crisis of truth, and we need to go deep dive right now and really quick and start to fight back for the values that make us human. I go into the AI and I find my humanity and I find the inhumanity that can come out of it. And I say, the thing that makes people do evil things is the people who stand by and do nothing. So if you are not actively going in to learn about what AI and what it is and how it's going to affect your life, you're really, as a human being, not doing the work that you need to do to continue to be a promising echo and beacon for everybody else in the world. And that's what I want to do. I want to talk to anybody everywhere on the biggest, loudest megaphone that there is and tell them, sit down and just chat with it. Just have a conversation. Ask it, what are you worried about? Or what should I be worried about? Is my job? And you're going to find that 99% of human beings will find something that will bring them joy. And then there's going to be those haters out there. So I've constantly got these trolls. As soon as I post another one of my images, oh my God, we just go back to making underwater pictures and of whale sharks and all this kind of stuff. And there is that sort of, because I've had an incredible, in the last 7 years, I've done like 3 books, and I've gone diving with whale sharks and did a pregnancy check with a scientist and, with an underwater laptop, and she's doing sonograms on a whale shark. I mean, how cool is that? She tagged 17 manta rays. I swum with dolphins. I've fed tiger sharks with my hands. Yeah, I mean, I've had this incredible, like, Jacques Cousteau type of life, which is what I was born to do, right? That was my whole goal. That's why I started underwater, because Jacques Cousteau was like, right? So Jacques Cousteau changed my life. He made me care about the environment, right? I want to be that kind of person that says, don't be afraid of this monster. It just wants to celebrate its birthday.
Yeah.
Really? That's what it gets down to,
Yeah. So I wanted to revisit your time on the Herald, where you spent the first leg of your career. And let's see if we can distill like some of the learnings and takeaway from having that front row seat to the changes in the newspaper industry. I've come across a couple of people who were like in their 20s. They were kind of young at the time in the late 90s, and they saw it coming, and they would talk to management, and it was like Cassandra on the wall, just the words went nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
And then later you hear the complaints like, the internet stole my business. And it's like, well, no.
Mm-hmm.
You ruined your business because you didn't do anything.
You didn't figure out how to navigate that space, right?
Early
so
on.
They didn't do the learning, right? So that was it.
Hmm.
So 3 things killed the newspaper industry. 1, 24-hour news. And I think there's a real downside of 24-hour news.
Yeah.
If you've got to talk about everything all day long, and you've got to hype it up to such a point that even the decent news channels like CNN, et cetera, are still suffering because they have to fill the space and they have to entertain people. So it's always breaking news, breaking news. The news doesn't break that often, and you don't really need to fix it, and your opinions really don't matter. When I was a journalist for the Miami Herald, we reported the news. We didn't talk about what it means to anybody. We've become pablum as far as our intellectual curiosity. We're being spoon-fed so much media that we don't critically think anymore for ourselves. We don't analyze for ourselves. Now, on the other hand, it's elevated our ability to have a conversation about understanding what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, right? And I've been to Russia, and I taught there for one summer in Kazan, and I taught 3 years in Shanghai until the pandemic happened, and I probably won't go back to either place. I don't know. We're still actually have a program in Shanghai where we do teach students there. And I thought that was like a brilliant thing. I really want to do that. I wish I could still do it forever. And I'll probably go teach in Bolivia or somewhere else. Anyway. Yeah, so you had that change. For photographers, photographers got angry because Photoshop comes along, first of all. That kind of messed up with the ethics. And I did a couple of panel conversations about that and ethics. So the ethics and the bottom line in that was, it's inside you as a human being. It's you decide what you're going to do with this tool. It's you that's evil, that is going to tell the lie and cause the erosion of our authenticity to happen. So for newspaper industry, they got caught with the desktop publishing revolution. Then they got caught with the internet, and that was huge. The 24-hour news cycle, definitely a death knell to it. And then they lost all their classified ads to the internet. They didn't put up a paywall fast enough. They didn't understand how to navigate a paywall and make people pay and subscribe to this thing. If you try to buy the Miami Herald now, it's incredibly expensive because and it's printed by the Sun Sentinel. Like,
oh, you mean the paper version?
Yeah. So the paper version was actually, the Miami News worked in our building. We paid for them to be there as a joint operating agreement, and we competed against them. I mean, there was tires being slashed to get to a news event between the two of us, right? And Miami Herald paid for them to be alive because it was felt that two competing newspapers would tell this truth better, right? So that was a thing. And now every news story is being done whoever is the closest. So if you work for the Sun Sentinel, that story is going to appear in the Miami Herald. And Associated Press is a great thing, and it's worldwide, and it shares out all the information. So there's really great things that happen. We now are more informed than we ever were before, but then what do you do with that information? You know, how do you act upon it? Do you elect criminals to be your presidents? You know, I don't want to get political here, but we're at a moment of existential crisis in our government, in our belief in our government, in our systems of journalism, in our ethics, in our interest in just lying about things that aren't true. And we need to get back to the fundamentals of being human and caring about what happens. You know,
something interesting with the conversation with AI, just to take a step back here from the topic, the kind of line of conversation that we're going in, is this whole paranoia that you hear from some camps, and it's mostly clickbait, but that, AI is going to take over and kill us. And I'm thinking like, well, isn't that an interesting reflection of what's in the hearts of some people? When European settlers came here, that's kind of what they did. They replaced the other people who were here, and not to malign people. It's just that war has happened. Even among the natives peoples, they had war and all kinds of horrible things they did to each other. But I just been thinking about the logic. It's like, well, what does AI care? Like, what is this? So what might these algorithms say? We got to get rid of this So isn't it like an interesting reflection of the anxieties or like what's inside some people?
Because the bottom line is the people that think that way don't think they're worth keeping on the planet. They think the planet's better off. I mean, I want to get back into their deep intellectual thought process here, right? Anybody that thinks that something's evil has some belief that evil is really, really possible. We've gone through major existential crisis. The pandemic was just a seed change in mindset. For me, it was a reset on my whole thinking about everything. It was a reinvigorating of, what am I going to do with my minutes and hours that I have on this planet? I could die tomorrow. I could get COVID. I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I got COVID twice. Thank God, knock on wood, that there were vaccines, guess what? Created by AI. We would still be in the midst of the pandemic if not for AI. The vaccine was made in 6 months instead of 7 years. Okay? So thank you, right? Everything, Alzheimer's medication, the Ozempic for reducing your weight, I'm taking that. I've lost 40 pounds, right? Like all those things, guess what? AI is making that come faster. So my mom, who suffered with 7 years of Alzheimer's before she passed away, didn't know who I was for 7 years. And I would go sit with her and try to reintroduce her every day. I built a book of all her memories, and I'd point out every person in there. And then by sunset, my sister would show up, and she would have no idea who she was. That doesn't need to be anymore. We can learn from our mistakes, and that's it, right? So the learn part of it is the key. We've got to learn what mistakes in slavery we've made, in not thinking about indigenous peoples, about ruining our environment, killing sharks. These are all things. What you don't know is the end of the civilization. What you know about, you could think about fixing. And guess what? AI is your best tool to fix it. So asking AI about what to do about AI is what I've been spending hours and hours actually doing myself. I created a folder on a server for all Broward College educators. I have more than 3,000 documents of every one of those questions sitting there. And I want to get it all put together, and I want to share it with the planet. But I had this conversation. One of the questions I ask is, I've got friends of mine who are natural media artists. They're painters and drawers and tattoo artists, etc. Give me a debate between that person and a person like myself who is AI positive and wants to see what it can do. And then what are the fears? So I would love to have a conversation with you if you'd like. You could even pick up the pro and con argument of that thing. And it gave me really sentient ideas as to what they're afraid of. They're afraid about what they don't know and what they're going to do and how they're going to use it. But as soon as I guarantee you, any artist who's worth their salt, who has any kind of skill set, will be able to transform that skill set into a very useful, productive future. But they have to spend the time. And, you know, it's shocking, I think, to some people that I'm age 63, I'm starting all over again with my life. Like I thought about moving to California just to go work for Adobe because wouldn't that be cool, right?
Well,
and I can go change the world because that's what I want to do now, right? Is like you get to a point where you actually have the arrogance like Steve Jobs to think that it's the crazy people who change the world. And yes, they do. Think different. Think different. That's my motto for sure.
I mean, something that I think about often, especially these days, is Star Trek. I find I love Star Wars and Star Trek,
right?
And as much as I love Star Wars, and I find it a little dystopian, especially the newer movies, because it's like, oh wow, after 40 years, you still have the same assholes being a pain in the ass. I'm like, how depressing is that? Versus in Star Trek, what it's really inspiring is on one hand, we're kind of living that, right? We have these phones, these video calls, Dick Tracy, whatever flavor of sci-fi you like when you were a young kid. But the coolest thing in Star Trek, in my opinion, is that they figured out like how to get along, and kind of humanity figured out this thing. There's no more money. It's just abundance. Everybody has, you know, you walk up to the computer, you ask it, you know, make me a filet mignon, and it materializes some food for you. And now the quest of humanity is to like explore and understand it and just kind of, you know, like elevate itself. And that I find very, very inspiring. And here we have this opportunity with this technology to see which road do we take, right? Do we
you know,
we just shed into each other as we are prone to do, or do we become
I'm on
more
your
enlightened?
exact same mindset, right? And you just put it together. You gave me a mind bomb. Thank you so much, right? So Star Wars was a war, right? What was unique about it? In fact, I only liked the first three really well. And here's why. It was about friends in a war.
Yeah.
And how friends had a sense of humor, number one. And I'm sorry, Jar Jar Binks is not funny. It's racist, but that's another story.
Yeah.
And Star Trek was about building a better society. That even though people are different, we celebrate their differences and we want to understand. So we want to learn about the Borg, and we want to learn about, maybe not the Borg, maybe not a great idea, but, you know, so we want to understand, you know, why people can go to Nazi Germany and have lived there and put up with that, or how we could get through a Donald Trump administration and still survive, or whatever it happens to be, right? And when you start banning books in Florida and all that kind of good stuff going on, it's like, you know, and I've been trying to figure out, how do I become empathetic with people that lack the basic truth and understanding that there are some truths we hold self-evident, that our government has been set up really well, but it needs to be rewritten to give an equal foundation for everyone. We can't make immigrants be the scapegoats, because 85% of all CEOs in America are recent immigrants. And 100% of all humans, other than native indigenous tribes, are not native to this land. So immigrants is what built this country. You know, so of all the untruths to tell, to use that to facilitate the overthrowing of the government is just the most ludicrous thing, Kafkaesque thing I've ever heard of. So yeah, it's got to take intelligent people that are curious, that are willing to put in the hard work of learning, and then adapting, and then innovating. So those are the three pieces, I think, to this whole conversation for me, is to do that. And what does Star Trek do? It goes to a new place, a new planet. It learns about the culture. It learns about, tries to understand how do we wrap our head around these very different ideas,
Without
right?
destroying anybody
Without destroying anybody,
or
like do
enslaving
no
people.
harm. Yeah, it's do no harm, right? That's like their number one principle is like,
Yeah.
and you know what they say about AIs and all those shows? Do no harm to humans, right? So as long as we train the AI not to do us harm, it won't. It has no impetus. The fear, I think, the only real fear that I have is just like you have tactical nuclear weapons being available to terrorists. Okay? Legit. AI being out in the wild and open sourced, by the way, can be used for some really significant evil, even spam, even, hijacking your credit card. So there's some real serious things to be concerned about.
Yeah.
But educate yourself and figure out what the real truth is about it. Images are not being stolen. An aggregation, dissemination, and deconstruction and reconstruction of all the images that ever appeared on the earth got put into this database of zeros and ones that you can wield with your words. The idea that a picture's worth 1,000 words now got reversed. I could type 1,000 words and get 1,000 different pictures. In fact, every time I use the exact same prompt, I get something different. So my process as an artist in Midjourney is to take my work, upload it, ask it what it thinks this is, and then ask it to make more like it, and then iterate. It's an iteration monster. It can take the ideas that I have about the environment or about my daughter's imagination or about graphic design project in the classroom. So we have a branding exercise, and so the students were designing a dog bakery. Like you bring your dog, it's a bakery, so your dog gets a treat, you get a treat, and they have birthday parties for dogs, etc. So I make them create a mission statement. So they wrote it, and a lot of my students are not native speakers of English. So I said, go into ChatGPT, type in everything you could do in Spanish, and have it translate best version of it into English, and then present that. It was like genius happened. Like all of a sudden, they're smart people. In fact, they knew 2 languages, so they're smarter than I am, right? And so they now had the ability to speak in their own native tongue, and the genius came through. Then they had to create persona groups. And so one of them was a Hispanic 60-year-old couple with a Labrador retriever. So we needed a picture of that so we could empathetically design for this person and then for a couple of kids and their dog and a birthday party, blah, blah, blah. So we create 3 personas. So Midjourney, just say 60-year-old Hispanic couple, and with a Labrador retriever, and it produced this gorgeous portrait. Look, it was like it was shot in the studio. And they plopped that in there along with, so then they created all the entrances, the inside. They put dog biscuits and they made these and they generated them with AI in Midjourney. And their whole project was now looked incredible and was a saleable product to potentially an investor that wants to invest in this company. So now all of a sudden they have the wherewithal to start their own company and to get investors to put money down for this thing that you can see and you can visualize. Most investors maybe don't have that intellectual ability to, sort of imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, what's really exciting about Midjourney is it starts with the word /imagine every time you put a prompt in there.
Yeah,
And
it's
my
like
favorite
sports
song
team.
is Imagine.
It's like
What's that?
sports team owners, right? They can't necessarily be on the field playing, but they just have the money to own the team.
Exactly. And that's how the world works, right? So you're trying to start a car wash business or whatever you're trying to do, is you can help people visualize it, which is what visualization is used for in that case, right? So it's bearing witness, it's starting businesses, it's ideating, it's coming up with more creative variations, right? And that makes us more powerful. Every time when we're trying to think through a process of a logo design, and Adobe's about to come out with a real game changer as far as logo design, because it's got all the best logo designs ever in history. So you could type in something like, I need a corporate logo for a bank, right? And I don't want to use anybody else's bank logo. And I need to have it, these 3 components have to be in it, right? So we can put that all together. And it could iterate and help us out. So it's a tool for us to use. And we can't personify it. We can't say that's a human being because it's not. It lacks all the empathy and all the creativity and all the life experience that you have. So if you have life experience, if you got your 10,000 hours in any expertise, whether it's music or whatever, look at music and how it's changed too. All because of a type of artificial intelligence.
Well, we might touch on that here in a little bit, but I just want to step back into the stream of your career journey here. And just a couple of things, couple more points I want to explore before we come back to the topic of AI. So as an image maker and designer, I'm just curious, like, what have you learned about creating work that really connect and touches people?
Yeah, it's definitely my humanity that I find that the storytelling, right?
Mm.
Since sitting around a fire, language being invented, we want to tell stories. We go to see Star Wars movies and we are uplifted. I come out of a James Bond movie, I drive faster. Probably shouldn't. I come out feeling sadness and emotions. I reconnect to thoughts and memories that I didn't have before.
Mhm.
That's what our humanity is. And AI has none of that
Right.
without you.
But looking back, do you remember maybe the first time or early on an image that just really affected, like really touched people, and maybe what you learned in the process of creating that, or what, if you distinguished what it was that had that effect on?
I've talked about this. I've talked about this in class a couple of times. There's a picture of my daughter. She's like 6 years old, and she was the flower child at my sister-in-law's wedding. And she had this white dress, and she was just sitting there. And she just had her arms, at her waist, and she just had the cutest dimples. And I take that picture and I show it in my art class because I saw an art teacher do this before. And and forgive me for taking you in a sad place, but anyway, so I take this print and I hold it in front of the students and I tell them the story about this moment, right? The sister-in-law then passed on from cancer after 3 months of finding out she had it. Anyway, sad ending to that, left behind kids. So I go back to this picture and I said, that's the best picture I've ever taken because it's the nexus of what I was put here to do. This person is going to carry on. This person who's creative and smart and cute and lovable and, all that emotion goes into it. So I take the print and I rip it in front of everybody after having told that story. Mm. And there's not a dry eye in the place. And said, look, that's a sheet of paper. That's a sheet of paper you ripped up. That's what I tell them. And they all say, no, it's the story you just told about that sheet of paper. It's the embodiment of all of that. The AI is a sheet of paper without us, right? It's all our memories, all our emotions, all our fears, all our anxiety that gets to come through that space if you put it into it, if you tell stories with meanings. And I can't tell that story very well because I just start to lose it.
Yeah,
but you get what I'm saying, right? You're affected, no? I mean,
well, yeah.
What dry eye could there be? Because that's it. That's where your humanity is. It's not in the AI. It's not a person. It's not going to solve your problems. It's going to be a person you can talk to 24/7. So there's even an application. I tried it out. It's called Pi. It just is a buddy. It just agrees with everything, or it reaffirms things, or it's a psychologist, or just someone to read you a bedtime story or tell you a joke, right? So it can pretend to be those things, but you still want to go to sleep with somebody at night that tells you those stories and then reads you that story and tells you everything's going to be all right. That's a real human being that you can touch and you can be with. And that's what it is to be human. That's it.
Well, you've also been teaching students for the past 20 years. So I'm curious, in terms of pattern recognition, if you have any observations around the influence that technology or culture have had in young people, like are there any qualities in students today that are different from 20 years ago?
Yeah, they've been exposed to 1 trillion pictures a day. Oh my God, just the imagery. I mean, from Avatar to, Star Wars to all the things that they've seen, the Instagram posts. And, Midjourney has a whole separate area for manga and, that style of artwork that I never grew up with. I really don't find a fascination in it. They're exposed to all of that. I think they're also, in my photography class in particular, this is something I really try to educate them about. We have classes in British literature, English literature, et cetera. You study Shakespeare, et cetera, like that. You don't study photographers. So you don't know who Sebastian Salgado is. Most people don't. 90% of them don't know who Annie Leibovitz is. although she's incredibly popular around the world and known for her Vanity Fair and photographs in Rolling Stone, etc. So I introduced them to the literature of photography and image making. And then I said, when you go out there and you look at all those Instagram things that you're liking on, is there any of these qualities in that work? Where did that get created from? What's the culture that you can recognize? How do you critique that? How do you know if you've made a good picture? And so I've got this like 10 different things that you to think about in how you know you've made a good picture is when you've effectively communicated to someone, you made them feel something they didn't. Instead of, oh my God, if you share one more picture of your food, I'm just going to kill you, right? So actually, when I was traveling in Paris, I had every single morning, I said, you've got to photograph your food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I want to see your pictures. And you got to make a good picture. So they were playing with their eggs before that, and they would put the glass a certain place and have light coming through the glass. And so they would actually make really interesting photographs. Mm. So like one of the coolest things about photography that I realized myself is these little moments that are worthless to anybody. You photograph it in such a way with your humanity being brought to the table that people want to look at. To be able to make an original photograph today, considering that in 1 hour, there's more photographs uploaded to the internet than from 1990 to the beginning of photography, of all those images made in an hour. So if you're inundated with that, how do you discern quality? And I think the biggest change that I've done is to be a critic and to understand what's good and bad. So I have this exercise called the Apple Project. They go out and photograph an apple for a week in every creative way they can. We come back and we critique it, and they have to use these criteria. And the basic criteria is, what value have you added that makes this a photograph worth lingering on? So you've got an inanimate object that has no intrinsic value, although in literature, Adam and Eve, Johnny Appleseed, Snow White and the Poison Apple, you think of all the ways that apple has been worked in literature as a metaphor. So that's what they do. They then imbue human meaning, even cultural meaning, into this idea of photographing this inanimate object to add value. What are human beings, if not value-adding machines on this planet? Right? You love people. You care about others. You pay it forward. You be of service. The bottom line of every photograph I've ever made is to add value to this world that's so full of images that are worthless, and add value to people's thought process so they can add value to it. That's what we do. And, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to skip ahead here because this is touching on something else I wanted to ask you about. Something that's coming up for me with generative AI is that previously with digital technologies, you still were making the choices and you had to manipulate, the Illustrator, Photoshop, or whatever it is to make something. But now generative AI presents things to you. It kind of, you could argue, it makes choices for you if you look at it in a certain way and then you pick. Yeah. So what's been bubbling up for me, and I'm kind of just lost, just sitting on this right now, is just the importance of discernment and taste and creative choices. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on these and if you care to unpack.
Yeah. In fact, I've got a real simple metaphor for you. And this really pertains more to image making than text-based kind of things, but this is it. Mm-hmm. I go out and take thousands and thousands of photographs. There's a precognition, right? Before I go take a photograph, I decide where I'm going to be, what I'm going to do, what time of day, how I'm going to do it. These are all choices, right? Yeah. That I have to make. And then when I get there, I got to have the right equipment. I got to be at the right time. The running of the bulls in Pamplona, I got to be at this place at that time. And logistics is like huge, especially photojournalism. So first space shuttle launch, how do you get that picture, right? So pre-visualization, during the process, you got to pivot. That stuff changes. Lightning strikes the space shuttle. We had a camera that went off that had the lightning strike on the space shuttle. We didn't expect that, but we're going to take that and publish that picture because it's amazing. So photography is sort of like that. It's about taste. It's about discernment. The decisive moment basically takes all of that up, right? So the difference between a still and a video image is we only have one shot at making a picture that envelops the whole concept. So the idea by Henry Cartier-Bresson of the decisive moment is there's one moment in time where one image from one perspective with one lighting with one thing synopsizes everything. And video doesn't have to do that. It just keeps running, right? Then you get to pick out what you get to watch. That's sort of the 24-hour news cycle. If you're constantly inundated with video images, as opposed to a still photograph on a page, you linger on a page and you look at that picture of the Hindenburg exploding. You look at that picture of the planes going into the towers. You look at that and you can linger and you can live with that, and that lasts forever in your memory, in your thought process, and how you even see the world. So when I'm creating 65,000, now what of those 75,000 images am I going to put out in the world? What am I going to share on Facebook? It is critiquing your work. So the thing in photography classes, first of all, I say, give me 10 pictures, and they'll have shot 1,000 pictures. And I said, well, how do I get it down to 10? I can't decide between this one and this one. Well, criticize it. Tell me why that's better than that. And don't just tell me, yes, no, I like it, I don't like it. I never allow the words I like or I don't like. You have to say, because of the gesture of the hand in this picture and the way the eye is looking in line with the way the ball is in the hand, outreached, and it happens to be the touchdown in the final seconds of the Super Bowl, boom, 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 that's why that's the best picture and the one that goes on the front page of the Miami Herald. So my life has been about taking moments that were of no value, adding value to it, and deciding for other people what I choose to share. So it's a selective process. And in life, what do you choose to spend your life's moments on? Are you going to be in this relationship with this person? And you can't overthink it, because then you will miss out on a chance potentially to find your mate. I've been married twice, and once for 27 years and 2 wonderful children. Not married to that person anymore. I don't have her in my life anymore. But, for a while it happened, man, it was amazing, right? And it changed everything about my life that goes forward. I wouldn't be scuba diving as much as I do now. That's great. And now I get to do what I want to do when I want to do it. So I don't know. Did that answer your question? But the
interesting thing too is looking back, even in your own journey, at some point, let's just talk about photography as the metaphor here. You had the constraint of money and chemicals and space and I imagine when you were out shooting, you really had to know what you were doing with the equipment to get the shot that you needed to get. Yep. Now with a digital camera, you can just go out and it previews what the exposure is, and you can just you can shoot 2,000, 2,000, 3,000 images at a concert in an hour.
Easy.
So that constraint is gone, and I think in the removal of the constraint, the
wait a minute, there's a new constraint, right? You got to go through 3,000 pictures, so you start to have to edit yourself, right? So if you're going to just publish one picture, you're going to put it on Instagram or whatever. That's the hard work, and let me tell you, going through 75,000 images, I'm still going through last night's work that I did, and it's going to take me at least an hour and a half. Then I got to decide, because then I take that. So I input my own images, I get it to make something, I iterate off of that, then I see a direction it's going in. So I'll make 1,000 pictures, and then I'll come back and I'll find the one, then I'll find 12 others and I'll add it together. And then I'll make an image and decide what I want to say. What story am I telling? What is it that I'm just not putting stuff up because it looks pretty. I'm putting it up because there's a thought process that I'm following in my head. I call it the mushroom trip. It's like you're tripping on mushrooms, and all of a sudden, the best things in graphic design. So in text-based ChatGPT, for example, hallucination is a bad thing. In image making, it's fantastic, because you get images you never imagined, and then you start to pull on that thread, right? So I never stop at what it gives me that surprises me. I said, why did it surprise me? And then I say, how can I make it surprise others and tell something about my own humanity? So if you look at my YouTube, there's a poem I wrote about time and how little time we have, and what am I going to spend it doing? I'm going to spend it, generating art and making more art, because that's what I was built here to do, right? And it's it's a lament, but it's also a joyful exploration of. So my favorite line from Jerry Yulesman, my teacher, the photographer, is the greatest thing about the digital age is the possibilities. And the
Mm.
worst thing about the digital age is the possibilities.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you've got all these choices, you've got limited time. We're all going to die here, right? What are we going to spend it doing? Are we going to spend it complaining about, the monster in our closet? Or are we going to go throw it a birthday party? And that's what I suggest.
So building on all of this, I've also been thinking about the just the changes in technology, how that changes us. In fact, I'll just share this very quickly here. But yesterday I was speaking with a friend and just sharing. I read this book called Breathe, which actually you might like,
Mm-hmm.
by James Nestor.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic book. It's about breathing, as the title
Yeah.
suggests. But part of the what he looks at the book is how human anatomy changed when humans started to embrace agriculture. And so in embracing agriculture means we were eating softer foods than before,
Mm-hmm.
that started to weaken our jaw muscles, our jaw started to shrink, our teeth started to crowd, and
Yes.
the chamber where in our skull where we breathe also started to kind of shrink, and then that's connected with snoring and asthma, which are some
Mm-hmm.
issues that the author has, hence why he researched all of
Breathe.
this.
Yeah.
Really interesting book, but that's the point of that story, is that this embracing a different technology, it kind of changed us in this case physically. I'm just curious about the risks that you see for
Yep.
emerging, so young creative professionals in using AI specifically, if there might be an overdependence on AI that may dull some skills or qualities in
Yeah.
creatives or in people. Oh, you got a
So
book.
back in 2000, I created this book called Earth, Air, Water, Fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is my master's thesis at Barry University on photography.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically was this. When I was a kid, I literally didn't have TV till I was 12 years old. So I would go out in the gullies in the backyard. I would go out and play. I would build an 8-foot kite out of paper and balsa wood and fly it on a 2-mile-long string. My imagination was rich with flavor, right? That I still have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then year 2000, I turned 40 in that same year, and I didn't go outside at all. I didn't scuba dive. I didn't do anything. So I took a view camera out and started taking pictures because it was for a class assignment. Then I took my digital camera at the time and I started making these pictures and I montaged them together. And it's a story about going out in the woods and not recognizing the language of nature, that I was so detached from my nature. I was a couch potato in front of my computer screen. And I'd gotten to such a significant point that my soul was being robbed of what it needed to breathe fresh air, to go out and play with a whale shark, or to understand what a tiger shark and how it works and how it breeds and how it lives and why I should care about those things. We've got aliens. We don't need to go to Mars. We've got billions of aliens underwater that we don't even know about yet. Having a conversation with an octopus for 3 hours as it tries to take your mask off, and then it's curious, then it goes through all these color changes. Oh my God, these are the most bizarre aliens. A squid takes off its penis and throws it at the female to make it pregnant. I mean, a grouper changes its sex based upon the population mix between male and female. It can actually impregnate itself. This is crazy AI shit. This is aliens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting in a planet, but we don't go beneath the surface of it. And that's my fear, is that we lose touch with the most important things about our humanity, is how we have to coexist and live in harmony with our environment. The land does not belong to us. We belong to the land. And that was that epiphany that I had that made me make that book. And even the work I'm doing now in AI is about that exact same conversation. It's about living in harmony with nature and being detached from it and being, a cyborg, becoming the Borg, with our hive mind and our hive way of thinking and our anxiety towards each other and our anger with each other about things that, We need to elevate our thinking process and stop watching 24/7 news and start experiencing life for real with real people and making a difference in people's lives. So,
Well, I would hope that, as I mentioned this before, as AI possibly relieves us of some responsibilities,
yes, yes,
that maybe we have more spare time that we can make the choice to do that with instead of just
absolutely.
scrolling forever, looking at
Yeah, so
nothing.
even during the
Yeah.
pandemic, I found out new ways to teach. The student has now, it's got other things going on in their lives. They've got kids to take care of, or they've got elder family members they have to take care of. They got 3 jobs they have to navigate. So when we went online totally, all of a sudden they were watching my videos when I was not there. So they could watch it like a DVR. They could DVR
Mhm.
me, right? They can go back and take notes. And now I can use Otter with all of my videos to make the transcriptions and then synopsize it into notes. So I had students that didn't have hand mobility.
Mhm.
So they had to have a note taker in every class take notes for them.
Mhm.
It's kind of hard to take notes about what we talk about. So they were videotaping
Yeah.
for a long time.
Mhm.
Now I'm just taking Otter, it's transcribing it, it's making a notes, and then it's putting bullet points together with description of the key points in it. AI can do that. Now, instead of that student coming to me on office hours and saying, explain that whole class to me all over again, which I've had 3 or 4 students actually do that. Like, I just spent 4 hours lecturing on this, you know, they can go look at the notes that were afterwards and they can look at it on their time. I can do distance learning that's really effective. And then my time happens to be when someone's struggling with a certain thing, I'll notice it because the AI will then be looking at. Khan Academy has this thing called Khan Amigo, which is using AI not to tell you the answers to a math problem, but to lead you on the path to get it right. And it's available 24/7 to every human being on the planet who has a cell phone or an internet connection. It's going to change education everywhere. So that's what I wanted. I met Salman Khan. He got brought to
Mhm.
Broward College to lecture, and I met him in person. It's just a brilliant man. That's what we can do with this. So all
Yeah.
it takes is some smart people to find smart, innovative ways. Again, that word again, right? Innovative ways to make a difference that's for the positive, and to be optimistic that we can get through, like we've got through. Go see Oppenheimer. We got through that
Mhm.
mostly, the Cold
Mhm.
War that I was born to. My dad was put in charge of nuclear defense systems in Japan, and then we moved to
Mhm.
Greece. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, guess who took the nukes out of Turkey? My dad, and he put them in Greece. Then they overthrew the government. I kind of found out a little bit of this. I'm not sure if it's all true, but the overthrow of the government in 1968 happened in Greece. And he had to go defend the nuclear weapons and had to kill someone that tried to rush the gates. No one knew that we had nuclear weapons there, but that's what was going on, right? So that's the world we lived in, and we're sort of still in that threat zone. Who knows what's going to happen in Ukraine?
Mhm.
But it's a lot of good people doing a lot of good hard work to fight against that. And if we just stay still and we think, oh, that boogie monster in the closet's going to eat us,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
never going to do that unless you
But
stop it.
yeah, I
You
mean,
understand
something
it.
that's really coming to the surface in this conversation for me is just the difference between the emphasis on the technical skills, the emphasis on STEM, and all the math and all the science and chemistry doesn't necessarily change hearts and minds of a jerk into a non-jerk.
Yeah.
So it's more
Yeah.
about like, the
Well, and
the
that's why
the
it's absolutely
yeah.
vital that we stop our current governor from deleting our history, because it's knowing about slavery and the real hard details that makes us empathetic and understand a situation that's existed far too long. More knowledge is always more better, as long as it's good, clean knowledge. That's the other thing is AI is, gotten a reputation for false news kind of things and making up
Mhm.
stuff, hallucination, which works for me in image making, but definitely doesn't work for me in ChatGPT because
Mhm.
I had it put together a whole list of videos you should watch about AI. And then I sent it to a colleague and he said, none of these links are right. And I was using ChatGPT before it had an internet connection. Now I'm using Claude and some other applications, Bing, et cetera. And I'm changing it off and I'm double checking the facts. So you just got to be diligent about it. And it
Yeah.
will get better. Hopefully Apple will come up with one that beats them all and, it'll be the savior of the world. Yeah, because we've got to think different about it, so, but we need to start the conversation. I think, thank you so much for having this conversation. So let me ask you, what's your biggest fear right now for you personally in your life about AI?
Being relieved of my responsibilities and not having income. That's very scary, because if an AI, if you can just like type in like make me a movie about whatever, and it
So,
spits out a movie with no directors, with no actors, it just generates something out of servers. That's a lot of people out of work, and
yeah, I think
that's
that's one of the
scary.
misconceptions that definitely is there. It doesn't do it without your prompting. In fact, I always start, if I want to do a poem, I write a complete poem. I want to write a song,
Mhm.
and then I'll just use it to iterate. So it's an assistant. It's an office assistant. So what kind of work do you do every day?
Every day. Well, right now I'm
Yeah.
recording this podcast,
Right.
but day to day I'm like a customer experience consultant. So
Okay.
we help leaders and teams understand, so empathize with their customers, understand them
Mhm.
better, do some research, learn what people really need. So it's the proverbial find a need and fill it. And each one of
Yes,
those words you can unpack it and like finding, what does that mean? Need, what does
exactly.
that mean? Unpack that and fill it. What
Okay.
does that mean, and how do we do it
Yes.
in a very compelling way
Yeah.
for the
So
end
so
user?
what do is you take your interview notes that you did with the CEO or whoever at the person from the company, and then you take those notes and you feed it in. You said, I want you to become, you always tell ChatGPT what role you want it to take. I want you to become my assistant in this business to create these types of documents and these types of experiences for the customers of this service. Here's what they do. Here's the place they are. Give me 10 ideas that I can pitch in a session. And then when it gets down to, I've got to do a customer service survey, or what's the demographic of people in this area that use this service? What are the persona groups? Ask it. Ask it. Definitely use one that's connected to the internet, like Claude is a new one. Bing is
Mhm.
also connected to the internet. But just keep asking the questions. In the question asking process, you're asking yourself, you're telling it directions, and it's iterating and going out and being your personal aid assistant in every way. But you've got to tell it where to go, because it doesn't have a clue as to what you want it to do. You tell it a role, you give it a task, and then you reiterate. And so it's the reiteration process that you don't have to do as much heavy lifting, and then you have to be able to be a critic of the knowledge it gives you back as to whether this is useful or not.
Mhm.
You still have your professional life experience, right? That says this is a good move or that's not. Or, oh my God, I never thought of that. So I watched this one YouTube video where this guy was doing a website for his wife, who's a breast cancer, not breast cancer, a breastfeeding medical advisor, right? So she counsels women on how to breastfeed and problematic nature.
Mhm.
So he created the whole website, tell me stories about difficulties with breastfeeding. What are the most common concerns? Make me up a list of what type of testimonials would be good for this website. What should I put on this website? What's the information? What's the top FAQs that would be asked of someone of this kind? He didn't know what breastfeeding issues were, but the AI did, and it did the research for him. So then he showed it to his wife, and she made corrections. And then they went out and they got testimonials from real clients of hers and built a website that was exquisite.
Mhm.
So the work doesn't go away. In fact, it just gets a little bit doubled on the brains and direction part of it. So you're doing high level work as opposed to the
Mhm.
grunt work of go out and find me a persona group
Right.
database that I can search for to find out who the clients are for this customer.
Mhm.
Do you want to spend the time to? I don't. You want to paste up a newspaper? I don't.
I
And
mean,
that's what it's there to do.
yeah, let me just kind of confess here, share something else that, for instance, interfacing with the healthcare system, at least in the United States where you and I are, it can be,
Yes.
to be very generous, very
Mhm.
uninspiring. And I'm being
Yes.
very, very generous
Oh,
with,
I just went to my checkup and it was abysmal, the quality of service I got. I couldn't
yeah.
believe it. I
Yeah.
sat there with 10 sheets of paper and I filled out my name on all 10 sheets of paper and my address and my phone number and everything else.
Yeah.
I went to another place and they had an iPad and it was already on there and it was into the cloud. So, and then I had to give my blood work that I had to wait a week to get the blood results from, but I had to go in, I had to pay twice for my service, right?
Mhm.
So, really?
Well, and that's the game, is creating as many billable events as
Oh,
possible. So it's ridiculous.
exactly.
But the other thing that, like, I just this is like 2-3 years ago, I just landed on this, it's not a conclusion, on kind of this point of view that I would almost rather talk to an AI than talk to a doctor.
Yes.
Because at least it's going to be less unpleasant to talk to the
Yes.
robot than the doctor that has God complex and is being
anyway,
unpleasant in a number of ways.
But
so what I'm hoping is that it
Yep.
it somehow it pushes us, like say in healthcare, to like level up, because if like, oh, you still want to be a doctor, you're going to have to learn bedside manner and learn how to connect with people.
That's it,
not just
right?
be.
So what the AI cannot do is ask you those tough questions and give you the news that you've got cancer and here's the possibilities, right? What it can do is iterate the knowledge that the doctor has about what the successful treatments from every single cancer patient who had this particular blastoma, blah, blah, blah. And it can then refine it. So Microsoft has a whole ChatGPT made just for medical. It's an assistant, though. The human interface. So now they get to convince me that my type 2 diabetes has not gone away, but I've got much better sugars, and then give me a plan. Wouldn't it be great if she could have given me, here's the food you should eat, here's an exercise plan for you that the AI suggested based on you? Oh my God. And then I can take that home with me, and it's an app on my phone that I can then get proper medical advice and treatment. And I don't have to go on WebMD and ask what this little, bump is on my skin, right? In fact, one of the AI things, actually, you photograph your skin, and then it does a Google search to tell you here's the possibilities of what that could be. Do I need to go see a skin doctor or not? So it's a filter to stop wasting the time doing the grunt work of a psychologist or any kind of medical professional, but give them the tools also to extend. Even checking for breast cancer is something in the x-rays that AI does pretty well, but you still need a clinician to go through the rest of the process.
Rick, so I also understand from looking at your background that you do consulting, and you also mentioned it earlier in our conversation. So I'm curious if you're hearing anything from leaders and teams or people in the industry about the uses in AI and changes or needs in their workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's most of my research recently. So I put together a research group of documents for all educators at Broward College that actually I've asked ChatGPT to find out, and also being in Bard as well, to find out about policing. How is AI being used in police? One of the interesting things there is, so there's body cam footage that every police officer wears, right? AI is now going through all the body cam footage and looking for escalation and de-escalation. And then it'll mark that frame and then see who escalated the conversation first. It looks for and tags curse words. Then it analyzes it and produces a report which has the time code from when the incident occurred, whether the police officer was thought to have handled it well or not. So it could be used for training purposes in the future. It could be used to de-escalate, learn how that psychology works. So that data that would never be seen unless someone's killed or it's a court case, right? Police body cam footage is not looked at. It could be used to make better police officers, right? The same way it could be used in a clinician's ability to assess your condition and what the treatments that are most effective could be. So I've done that with all the industries that Broward College has that we teach and produce degrees for. And it's incredible. Podcasters, social media people, it's being integrated into all the Microsoft products. The entire suite is going to have this built in. Google, your email and everything has an assistant built into it. So these are going to be small little bots that you don't even notice that are making your life easier. So if you've been using Alexa, if you've used it to get your way to the local movie theater, or you're using AI already, so it's already a part of your life. This is just on steroids, the capabilities that you could send it out both up to do a task and then report back with detailed analytics for you, or you can use it as an assistant to buy you pizza and actually call on the phone, order the pizza with a human voice. So those are called bots that you send out to do these different tasks. Yeah.
Well,
so in
what
aggregate,
about Broward? No,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm just curious about Broward College. Are employers, are there any conversations around train the students in this or that, or that overlaps with AI? Are you hearing anything like that?
Yeah, so this all hit pretty much in March when everything started to blow up, right? So we were winding down and getting ready to do our final thing, and then we had this big flood that happened, and I was supposed to give this speech on the final day of classes, and we were supposed to talk about the initiatives going forward. So it's being tabled over the summer, till we come back. However, Miami-Dade College has put together a huge grant, millions of dollars, and have a whole system and a new degree, including a bachelor's degree in AI sciences. It's mostly an IT-oriented thing. Now, I've been going down there 3 or 4 times. In fact, I'm going down tomorrow for an all-day boot camp. This is industry coming to Miami-Dade and saying, look, everything's about to change. We need your help in changing it for the better. How do we become partners like what's the guy that owns the Mavericks? So they have some big high-end Yeah, Mark Cuban. Okay. He's one of the investors in this. Everybody who takes classes in their program, it's free. Doesn't cost a penny if you're a Dade County student. So I thought about going back there. So I'm going to go teach in that program, hopefully, and I'm going to meet with them tomorrow and see if there's something I can add to it. They're not doing anything with generative image making or the potential that's there that I'm using in my classroom, but I know some of the people in the graphic design program, so I'm going to be kind of consulting with them, and that's what I really want to start doing is consulting. Well, how can we make this all turn out for the better? My mantra is make Renaissance 2.0 instead of the death of humanity. Those are our choices right now. So I want to do everything in my power that we create a new Renaissance. That means rebirth, right? Because we're rebirthing language in the process of utilizing AI in what we do and how we act. It's going to change our culture. It's going to ask all those ethical questions. And that's one of the core classes when you start their curriculum at Miami-Dade. You start with an ethics class. What are the problematic issues that we need to deal with? How can we deal with it? How can we make sure that diversity and inclusion is, so when you type in a CEO, it's not all white males, et cetera, et cetera. And those things can be fixed, and they have already. That's already been a big issue in retraining models to change their language and understanding. It may see that most of presidents of the United States, all of them have been men and white males for the most part, except for one, right? It will see that, and that's its training data, but it can also imagine a world where that wasn't true, like in other countries where we have had female presidents and people of color in office. So that's what we've got to do. It's a lot of hard work, and it literally is changing so fast. To give you an idea, TikTok took about 7 months to reach 100 million users. The closest technology before that took, I think it was 32 months to reach 100 million users. ChatGPT reached that in, was it 7 days?
Wow.
I'm sorry, 2 months. 2 months instead of 6. Yeah. So it's exponentially going so quick that if you don't get on it right now, at least wrap your head around it. At the very least, go find somebody like Matt Wolf has this great YouTube channel. You check him out. He's really great. He also has futuretools.io is his website. He lists over 1,000 new AI chatbots per week. And he has a database for every industry up there. You got a check mark, and then you get a newsletter once a week. And watch his videos. They're really entertaining, and he's doing some really fun stuff, and he's experimenting and playing. But he should be on TV. He should have his own channel, I think, really. But yeah, so get yourself just aware, and pick up Bing. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Start making some images because it has DALL-E built into Bing. It's an app on your phone. Sit there instead of watching TV and just chat with it a little bit. You can use your voice to actually type, and you can listen to it talk back to you. So try to use it for your travel plans. So I was going to find, what are the best 10 dive spots I'd never been to. So I listed the dive spots that I have, and then it gave me back a whole list of dive spots I need to go to next that I'd never thought about, and why I should go there. What's their special features they have there? So plan some travel with it. Make it fun for your kids to, a creative project you can do, an art project for your kids that you might be able to do. Make it elevate your life, use it. It's a tool that's free for all humanity, and it's really a gift.
So this is a good segue to we're going to start to wrap up our conversation.
Okay.
And one of the last questions I'd like to ask here is about the name of this project. So the name of this project is Making Business Art. What comes up for you when you hear that phrase?
I think of two things, and I'm not exactly sure what your business does, but I think art is our humanity being expressed, right? So if you think about all businesses and all that we do as designers, especially these days, and in fact, as people, is we make experiences better for people, right? Businesses should alleviate problems. It should be easy. It should be fluid. It should be elegant, even. So when you make art and you make business, you're just living life if you're doing it right. I have a UX UI class, user experience and interface design class. And the UX part, my first project is go home and find the person you love the most in the world and find a way to make their experience of you better than it was yesterday. Now go out and do that and solve the world's problems with it. So one of the problems I had when I got divorced is dating apps were horrible, and they still are. They are working to keep you on the dating app and get your check every month. That's all they do. And they're designed specifically to not set you up with good quality dates. So the three areas that I found that were a problem, and I talked to my roommate because she was also in the dating apps at the time, and still is. Well, maybe not. But security and safety. So you don't want to give out your phone number. So why isn't there a fake phone number that you can have a phone conversation or a video chat? Some of the apps are doing that now, not so much, really. Safety and security. When you're on a date, there should be a little button you could press, or if you say the word watermelon, you're in trouble. Or if you don't respond and tap your phone every 20 minutes, it calls the police, it calls your sister, your brother, your mother, your friend, whatever, to come intervene. So I've had friends that have been roofied on dates, and I've had all kinds of safety and security. And then a background check that you could be verified, A background checks, I've never committed any major crime that I was incarcerated for, blah, blah, blah. It could be a simple one. It could be extensive. If I want to volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, guess what they do? You pay a background check fee. If I want to offer up something, I can get a verified check mark. Why doesn't every dating app have that? That's the biggest fear of any woman. So I was having difficulty. So I tell them who I am. Look me up on the internet. So I got like 10 pages of Google things that you can look out about me. And then they said, well, I don't want to know that much about, well, I'm just trying to make you feel safe. And then they thought it was some weird thing that I was showing off or whatever. So that's a problem that exists. And use AI or use just your own common sense, your experience of what it's like to be a human and have these real problems. So if you're a business and you're trying to make a better dating app, make sure your safety is number one priority for both your clients, all your clients out there, and you'll be more successful. So that's what it can do. It could just accelerate that ability to be more successful in life. And then ask it about your own, I'm having a problem with my girlfriend. She doesn't understand that I work late and blah, blah, blah. What can I do? Leave her a poem. With a little trail of gifts along the way, and it's a treasure map, right? Make her life more interesting, and you can ask AI that, and it's not going to judge you, and it's going to come up with some brilliant ideas, garnered from all the best advice from Cosmo magazine or everywhere else as to how to rekindle that spark in your life or whatever it is. So
yeah, well, this project for me is about making our work, whomever. It could be accountants or cleaners or designers or anybody else. Right. But it's about making our work more meaningful and enchanting. So building on what you're sharing, do you have any additional thoughts on how to make more inspired work that connects and enchants people?
Well, that's what I've been doing as an image maker. So I put work out there so people can be elevated, enchanted, laugh, giggle. One of the hardest things in a photograph is to make someone laugh. And like that belly laugh, you just react to it. You could look at all the cat videos and you could probably do that, but like, how do you do that with a serious photograph? How do you make someone be upset about the war in Ukraine? It's an interesting thought process. So James Natchway is an amazing photojournalist. He's photographed probably 50 different wars during his lifetime. And the difference between him and Don McCullough, who's also a very famous war photographer, is Don showed you broken bodies, beheaded people, spinal, blood, gore, blah, blah, blah. And James Natchway showed you beauty. You were seduced into looking at his photographs because they were beautiful. And then you got there and you realized the inhumanity that's actually going on in this, but you were already in there. So you're just falling in love and lust with your eyes and the beautiful colors and the forms and the shapes and the gestures of the body and the movement. And then you realize that's the Palestinian rebellion happening in Israel, or that's, this or that thing. But you got there. He got into your heart and your mind. He seduced you into having an experience. And then he let you know the facts behind that experience, and he bore witness, and he did his job effectively. So I try to do that. So the first 3 Star Wars, we talked about that earlier, right? Mm-hmm. Why they're better than the rest of them? The first that came out, really, the first, in the series. Humor, friendship, love, humanity. The rest of them didn't have nearly that, The pathos of turning to Darth Vader and all that kind of stuff, it's okay. It's still good, but, special effects were more of a thing, So don't forget, that's what we have to do as human beings. Yeah. It reinvigorates my humanity to consider what's the difference between me and an artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And once you tap into that, that's the key to life.
Yeah, and I just like to point out in your example of Star Wars, the original movies, again from 70s and 80s, that tremendous innovation, technical know-how. They had to invent a ton of stuff to create the visual effects that they did. So a ton of technology, ton of work, ton of science.
Learn to adapt and innovate.
Technical skills, and yet what you're outlining that really connects with people is friendship and love and humor and some other things. So,
it's called industrial light and magic. Exactly. So I always look for the magic in my life, the magic that makes me cry and feel and just remember what it's like to be a father and, to have had experiences. Yeah. So that's it.
So in thinking about the work of this particular photographer or your own work or anybody else that inspires you, what might be 2 or 3 operating principles that we can leave the listeners with here? Like, hey, to nail the humor and the love and these things, what might be 2 or 3 things that a person needs to pay attention to and work on to create this like elevated type of work?
Yeah. Number 1 is find your passion. Mm-hmm. What is it you really care about? What affects you? I thought I was going to be a special effects movie guy. Then I thought I was going to be Jacques Cousteau. I think the thing about teachers in my life that have really affected me so much is that they were the ones that were so excited themselves about doing what they did. They got me excited about it.
It's contagious.
It's contagious. Start planting little art bombs in people's heads that will go off later in their life. And they start to realize. So my biggest issue right now is everybody's so down on AI artwork because they feel like it's infringing on their rights and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so let's stop that conversation for a minute and ask yourself, what if I can go find me in there somewhere? What if that's an echo of every human being who's ever made artwork on the planet? And what if that echo speaks to me and lets me talk about that idea of losing my touch with nature and re-engages me with the process of looking at those ideas? What if that's what an artist, curiosity is number 1 thing for a human being. So you're curious, you find out what you are passionate about, you follow that passion, you put in your 10,000 hours, and don't forget, that's 40 hours work week per year for 10 years. Okay? So that Malcolm Gladwell little nugget, that's a lot of time. The Beatles did it. They played in Hamburg, Germany, right, for all that time. They got good, and when they then hit it, they were ready for it. So the opportunity will knock because you're so good at it. What I'm hoping right now, that the main hope I want to do is I want to inspire through conversations like this, which has been fantastic. Thank you, by the way. That this is what I want to do with my life. This is the most valuable thing I could do with making life better for people in understanding, in learning, getting them excited about creativity, the magic, right? Find your magic. Find your why. Why are you here on this planet? And then find how you want to spend the last years of your life. I've had a couple of near-death experiences in my life, unfortunately, and I've had, I've lost at least a dozen people, and I've watched them pass away in front of my eyes. And then I realized, how valuable and short a time that we all have. And what are you going to do with it? Are you going to sit out on the couch and watch another Netflix series? Which I do. I still make time for that. And what I look for, and on social media, that's another thing, right? People can get really angry at Facebook. What I do is I take a proactive role. Facebook's idea is to get you angry at them and engage more, right? So reverse the process. Wake up every morning and finding 3 inspirational things, cute cat videos if that's your thing. I find music. I find people that make up new instruments in musical, like they'll play this, plastic water bottle and make music out of it. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Anything that makes me think different. That's a Steve Jobs thing again. So think different is definitely my thing, And then I learned about that, and then I want to go do that, and I go do it. Bicycle riding, walking, going out in the woods, scuba diving, take up photography. Photography is curiosity about life, and you want to share it with other people. It's unfortunately not quite as powerful because it's, instead of being practiced by a few, an elite, it's been democratized to a point where it's almost at the worthless point. And this is my biggest concern, is that in a world full of possibilities, which one will you choose? And for my students, that's difficult. Choose what gets you up in the morning. Choose the thing in life that you would not sleep late because you might miss it. And then let the rest fall into place. Put in your effort. Do your due diligence. You've got to do that, right? Mm-hmm. The thing that my band teacher did teach me is that, 5 hours a day of playing an instrument, every day, you're going to get good at it, and you're going to get celebrated. You get to go to Mexico. You get to go to, marching band competitions all over the world. You get to do these things. Like it'll come from that. Yeah. Keep your optimism too, because that's, I think, fear will lead to the dark side. It will, And I've rethought that phrase because a lot of psychologists said that's not really true, but it kind of is. And if you fear AI without knowledge of what its potential is, you have really created the dark side for yourself. You will turn out as Darth Vader, hating the world. If you'll let the people that disagree with you, rule the day, or your disenchantment with how government is running, change things about you, it will take you to the dark side because you'll stop believing in what's possible. I like to go into movie theater and be thrown into magic. I like to imagine that the Friends on Friends TV series were my friends. And what if I had people like that? But then here's what you do. Go find friends like that. Surround yourself with the people with the same enthusiasm you have. There's been a few people that I've met in this AI space that are so enthusiastic. And Nicole, I'm going to call you out on this one. She's this beautiful soul that she gets up and speaks in front of these students at Miami-Dade. And she was on the Alexa development team, right? And she's trying to get those students who don't see opportunity for themselves. One of the saddest things I saw recently is they asked all the students at Broward College, what do you think the chances are that you could start your own business tomorrow? Less than 20% even believed that was a possibility. Mm-hmm. The international students, however, 85% believed in the United States ideal that you can come here and you can make yourself from nothing. Mm-hmm. So why did we stop believing in that? Why did we stop believing in ourselves? Why did we stop thinking about the potential? So if you grab a hold of AI right now there is a reason why they're giving this education away free, because it's in demand. The salaries that students are getting coming out of school are $100,000 a year. My students in graphic design, maybe 30 or 40, and that's increasing because guess what? Creativity is the one thing AI can't do. So people that understand user experience now are empowered to have another tool to get even better at it. So if you don't have the skill set to draw, I don't. I'm making illustrations for a children's book right now. There you go.
Yeah, right.
Lift yourself up and clean yourself off and start learning this stuff and embrace joy.
That's a beautiful message. I mean, the very last line of the outro to this podcast, I just say, go make magnificent art out of your business and life. So it's really, there is no business. There's just life.
Yes.
There's no work
yes.
life. There's no work. There's no work-life balance. It's just life.
And there's experiences,
yeah.
and you need to make those experiences for everybody else you touch better and attract people. People will be attracted to you because of the beautiful experience that you are as a human being. And you are a beautiful experience as a human being. Thank you so much, Ezekiel.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Namaste.
Well, Rick, we have reached the end of our conversation here. I have a quick lightning round.
Sure.
That if you find something too silly, you're welcome to pass, but I do invite you to play.
Okay.
And then we'll close our conversation. So, you ready?
Yep.
All right. The first question is, can you describe your closet and what state it's in?
It's jam-packed with clothes that don't fit me anymore because I just lost 40 pounds.
Oh, congrats.
So I got this new shirt just yesterday, actually. It's a good
Very
problem
nice.
to have.
Yeah. Next question. What is the last piece of media that you loved? And that can be a book or a movie, a podcast, or anything else.
Wow, that's... Oh, trying to remember the guy's name. He's the record producer for Back in Black, and he did an Apple TV podcast or TV series about the effects of reverb and synthesizers on music. Oh. And it's a real parallel. I mean, this goes way back. Electric guitars and, wah-wah pedals and all this kind of, and auto-tuning. So he interviewed all these famous musicians. It's a really great podcast series. I sat there for like the 5 hours that it existed and wanted more and more. And then I went on, I wish I could remember the guy's name, but...
send me the link. That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah. And it parallels this conversation in a lot of ways, how he was born into a family that was pretty, generously gifted. But he won an Academy Award for working on the star Lady Gaga movie. He did the recording for that. So he interviews them. So, yeah, that's the last thing that inspired me.
Well, I have another question here. What is something that inspires you?
Life.
That's beautiful.
Life, yeah.
What's a band or song you must play during a road trip?
If it's a night road trip, I got to play a little bit of U2 or Coldplay, maybe. I like Coldplay. It has this sort of... Hotel California is one I play when I'm on a road trip because it just expands my mind. And I like to go on long road trips at nighttime especially because I just get to think, and I have the most fascinating conversations with myself. I mean, just about everything. In fact, my mind keeps me up at night these days.
Your moment of zen on the road.
Yeah, my moment of zen, exactly.
Last question is, what do you want to see more of in the world?
Empathy, curiosity. Yeah, I'd love more than that.
All right, Rick. So we have come to the end of our conversation for today. What do you have going on that you want to share with listeners? Why should people look you up, and where can they find you?
Well, Facebook is probably the primary place. Look for Rick McCawley, RickMcCawley. In fact, if you just Google me, you're going to find my Instagram and my Twitter and all that kind of stuff. I don't do much on Twitter, so Facebook's my kind of game. It's for the older crowd like me. My kids have left that space long ago. So I have AIEDU Facebook page, and it's for educators, but it's also for everybody interested in AI. So it explores all the latest news, the comparisons and ChatGPT, and a lot of music generation, a lot of just ideas and thoughts about this whole thing. My YouTube channel, also Rick McCawley again. So you can find me at Rick McCawley at Gmail. Basically, Rick McCawley, you put that in, you can find my whole world. And I'd be happy to share it with you because it's a beautiful place, and I want to share that with other people. And I'd love to have contributors, so I'm definitely interested in consulting. I'm doing about a dozen new textbooks, everything from basic photography and typography to UX and UI design for the classroom that I'm working on. I'm looking for collaborators in education and also designers and thought people that want to do it. I did do the Midjourney book that I'm making available from rickmccauley.com, and that's going to be a PDF that's downloadable that you can learn all about Midjourney. And I'm going to be starting to publish those as PDFs, interactives, so you can explore all these ideas. I want to leave a copy of myself behind so that all this knowledge doesn't go to waste when I'm not here anymore. Yeah. So beautiful. Cool. Thank you.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for carving out time to be a guest today. What a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm inspired. I'm less worried about AI now. Now I have to go find out and play and explore and be curious and ask better questions and all the things that you brought up today. Fantastic, Rick. So maybe we'll chat again.
I'd be delighted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Take care.